My husband criticized my job in front of my team, saying I'm just lucky. So I quietly printed his salary. When I showed the comparison, one coworker just whispered, "Wow, that's embarrassing, I'm Sloan. I'm 39, based in Chicago, and I work as a senior product designer at a well-established tech company." I'd been in the field long enough to remember the days of designing on Photoshop with 20 open browser tabs just to make one responsive layout work. I don't have a fancy degree or family money. Everything I have, I earned from years of grinding, self-teaching, and not quitting when things felt impossible. My husband, Kalen, is 41. He's been in IT support for over a decade, working at a mid-sized law firm in Evanston. His job is decent, nothing glamorous, but he's consistent. Or at least, he was. When we met, he admired how passionate I was about my work. We'd sit at the kitchen table, both with our laptops open, bouncing ideas off each other or helping solve the other's work problems. Back then, he'd cheer me on during late-night project crunches and celebrate even my smallest wins. He was proud of me. Or so I thought. It started small. When I got promoted to lead designer, he said, "Wow, they gave it to you that fast?" That was the first time I felt something off. Then I got a bonus. A pretty substantial one. His reaction? "Tech companies throw money at people for nothing now, huh?" I laughed it off. It felt like a bad joke. But then the pattern continued. When I'd talk about my team's accomplishments or share work updates, his energy would shift. He'd change the subject. He started making sarcastic comments during dinner with friends like, "Sloane's the tech queen now. She could design an app to do the dishes next." Still, I didn't want to assume the worst. We were married. Couples tease. I didn't want to be dramatic. Then came the company retreat. It was a 3-day offsite at a resort in Lake Geneva. We were allowed to bring our partners. I brought Kalen because, despite everything, I still wanted him to be part of my world. Part of my life, which felt bigger than ever. The first night was fine. Fancy dinner, wine, everyone mingling. He chatted with a few coworkers of mine, my manager Elise, my direct report Mia, and a few others. He was charming, even funny. Maybe a little too much. He talked over people a bit, cracked some old-school IT jokes, and seemed determined to impress everyone in the room. But it wasn't until the second night that everything really blew up. We were all sitting around this massive dinner table, 20 or so of us. It was relaxed, appetizers, wine, team stories. The conversation turned toward how everyone got started in the industry, and Mia, curious as ever, asked me how I broke into tech without a formal degree. So I told them. I kept it simple, how I worked retail by day, taught myself HTML and design software at night, took unpaid internships, slowly worked my way into freelance gigs, and finally landed my first junior role at a startup in River North that didn't even exist a year later. People were nodding, listening, genuinely interested. And then, out of nowhere, Kalen chuckled. "Oh, come on," he said, loud enough to cut through everyone's conversations. "Let's not pretend it wasn't luck." I blinked. "What?" He shrugged, taking another sip of wine like this was a casual observation. "You were in the right place at the right time. That's all. I mean, Sloane's good, sure. But a lot of this stuff, it's fluff, right?" The table went quiet. You could hear the clink of silverware being set down. "Fluff?" Elise repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he said with a smirk. "I mean, she makes double what I make." "For what? Slideshows and talking about user flow?" He laughed. No one else did. I sat there frozen. My face was hot, but I kept smiling because I didn't want to make a scene. My hands were clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. No one said anything. Eventually, someone awkwardly changed the subject. The mood never fully recovered. That dinner ended early. Kalen thought it was all a joke. "Don't be so sensitive," he said when we got back to the room. They all know I was kidding. But I wasn't laughing. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out when the shift had really started. When his support turned into snide comments and subtle digs. And now this, public humiliation. In front of my team. He hadn't just disrespected me. He had done it strategically, where he knew it would hurt. The next morning, while he was still sleeping, I quietly got up, dressed, and headed to the business center near the resort's lobby. I logged into my company portal, printed my most recent pay stub. Then I pulled up our shared financial account. We'd synced it via Mint years ago. I found his latest payslip. Printed that too. I slipped both into a plain manila folder. It sat in my bag all day, heavy and silent. I didn't plan to use it. Not right away. I just needed to see it. I needed a physical reminder that I wasn't imagining the imbalance, not just in earnings, but in respect. That afternoon, we had a design thinking workshop. Mostly internal, just me and my team. Kalen decided to tag along again. He sat off to the side, arms crossed, watching everything with that smug look he'd started wearing lately. We were mid-discussion when someone brought up the role of confidence in career growth. Mia made a comment about imposter syndrome and how easy it is for people to discredit others' success by calling it luck. That was the moment. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and without saying a word, walked over and laid the 2 sheets on the center of the table. My salary, I said quietly, placing my hand on one sheet. His salary, I said, gesturing to the other. Any other questions about how much of this is luck? The room went silent. Then Mia, barely above a whisper, said, "Wow. That's embarrassing." Kalen didn't say a word. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and walked out. No one followed him. We didn't talk for the rest of that retreat. When we got back to Chicago, we barely spoke for days. I went to work. He stayed distant. He didn't apologize. In fact, he doubled down. "You humiliated me," he said finally, when we did talk. That was a low blow. A low blow? I snapped. "You embarrassed me in front of my team. You made me feel small in front of people who look up to me. And I'm the one who crossed the line?" He didn't see the problem. Or he didn't want to. Either way, something cracked that night, something that couldn't be patched with another date night or couples therapy brochure. We tried one therapy session. He told the therapist I was becoming someone else. That I was too focused on work, that I was trying to prove something all the time. When I asked him what exactly I was trying to prove, he said, "That you're better than me." That was the moment I knew it was over. After that night, the atmosphere in our apartment turned thick. You know how some silences aren't just silent, they're loaded, buzzing with everything unsaid? That was our new normal. We weren't yelling. We weren't fighting. But we weren't anything. Kalen started coming home later than usual, citing server issues at work or last-minute support tickets that somehow always coincided with the nights I made dinner. He didn't kiss me goodnight. Didn't ask about my day. He seemed allergic to the sight of my laptop now. Anytime he saw me working late, he'd mutter things like, "Don't know how you fake it that hard every day," just loud enough for me to hear. I stopped replying. Stopped defending myself. I was just tired. And I think that's what he wanted, to wear me down. But something else happened. My team? They started treating me differently, but in a good way. More openly. Mia sent me a message the day after the retreat, "You didn't have to do that, but I'll never forget that you did." Elise, my manager, pulled me aside and told me how powerful that moment had been. She didn't say it to flatter me, she was more the straightforward type, but she meant it. I think it shocked them all to see someone stand up for themselves like that. Calm. Unflinching. Not dramatic, just honest. I think they saw me differently after that. Not just as a capable leader, but as someone who didn't take disrespect, not even at home. Kalen hated that. A week after we got back from the retreat, I got an invitation to speak at a design conference in San Francisco. It wasn't just any conference, it was the one. Big names, big opportunities. I was thrilled. I came home that evening and told him, cautiously optimistic. I hadn't shared any career news in days. He didn't look up from the couch. "Oh," he said. "Cool. Another excuse to play celebrity." It hit me like a slap I'd already braced for. "I'd be gone 3 days," I said. "You could come with me. It could be good for us." He scoffed. "Watch you get another award for your PowerPoints." "Nah, I'm good." That was when it dawned on me, he didn't want to be better. He just didn't want me to be. The resentment was rooted so deep now that he couldn't tell the difference between my success and his sense of failure. I started sleeping in the guest room. At first, it was about sleep schedules, my hours had changed, I told him. But really? I couldn't share a bed with someone who resented my existence. And then came the night I found the texts. I wasn't snooping. He left his phone unlocked on the counter while he was in the shower. A message popped up, previewed on the screen. "Last night was fun." Smiling face with smiling eyes. Can't stop thinking about it. No name. Just a number. I wish I could say I hesitated. I didn't. I opened the message thread. Dozens of messages. Some tame. Some definitely not. A woman named Brenna. From work. Apparently, he'd accidentally brushed her hand while fixing a printer and, well, things escalated from there. I stood there, holding his phone, numb. Not angry. Not shocked. Just still. He walked out of the bathroom a minute later, towel over his shoulder, still drying his hair. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Who's Brenna?" He froze. That was all I needed. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter, turned, and walked away. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it was because I was on my laptop, not working, but gathering everything I needed. The mortgage documents. Our joint accounts. My lawyer's contact information from years ago when we drafted the prenup. I didn't even need to think about it. It was like a switch flipped, and suddenly, everything became clear. There was no saving this. No therapy. No conversation. No, maybe he's just stressed. This man had not only humiliated me publicly, but had quietly been chipping away at me for years, and now he was sleeping with someone else and walking around like I was the one who needed to be put in check. I scheduled a consultation for the following Monday. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. For the next few weeks, I kept things normal. Civil, almost overly so. I cooked dinner some nights. Asked him about his day. He started loosening up again, thinking things were back on track. He had no idea I was tracking every shared expense, calculating buyouts, logging behavior. Every time he came home late, I noted it. When he left his dirty dishes after claiming he was too tired, I logged the timestamp. I wasn't being petty, I was being prepared. One evening, we were watching some show, he'd picked it, of course, and I asked, "Hey, do you think we're happy?" He didn't even look away from the TV. Yeah. Why wouldn't we be? I stared at the side of his face, thinking, that's it. That's why. We were never going to have a real conversation again. I could scream everything he'd done in his face and he'd still think he had the moral high ground. And maybe that's what made it worse than the cheating. Worse than the public put down. It was that he really thought I'd stay. That somehow, despite everything, I was still the same woman who needed his approval. Still the woman he met in a dingy apartment years ago, trying to break into a field she barely understood. But I wasn't her anymore. I hadn't been in a long time. And if I'm being honest? He never noticed. I scheduled the meeting with the attorney for the following Monday at 2 p.m. sharp, downtown Chicago, near the courthouse. Kalen thought I was going to meet a client. He even offered to drop me off. I declined. Funny how he was suddenly attentive again, after weeks of distance. I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me angry, watching him play husband now that he felt like he had something to lose. But I kept playing my part. I smiled. I made coffee. I reminded him of his mother's birthday. All while collecting everything I needed. The attorney, Michelle Choi, was calm and precise. Sharp as a tack. She remembered drafting our prenup back when Kaylin and I first got married. Back then, we both thought it was just a formality, no assets to speak of, just two people trying to look grown up. We never imagined we'd need it. Michelle remembered me. She complimented my career growth, casually noting the article I'd written for Wired the year before. I didn't even realize she'd read it. Good work, by the way, she said, flipping through the paperwork. And smart, keeping that prenup updated 2 years ago. A lot of people let those get stale. That was when I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I had done something right. We went through everything. Finances. Assets. The condo. The joint account. Our 2-year-old SUV. The dog. Do you want to pursue spousal support? She asked. I laughed. God, no. Michelle smirked. Didn't think so. When I walked out of her office that day, I felt lighter. Still heavy in the heart, sure. But there was something empowering about taking that step, about finally acting after months of letting things happen to me. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was clarity. Back at home, things continued as if nothing had changed. Kaylin was still spending late nights at work. Still texting on his phone with the screen angled away. Still pretending like he didn't notice when I came home late from actual work events, too tired to argue. At this point, he wasn't even hiding it well. I think a part of him wanted to get caught, wanted a reason to blow things up so he could feel less guilty. But I wasn't giving him that. Instead, I waited for the right moment. And it came, faster than I thought it would. 2 weeks later, my company hosted a small post-retreat appreciation dinner for the design team and spouses. Nothing fancy. A trendy little spot in West Loop, dim lighting, industrial decor, overpriced cocktails. I almost didn't invite Kaylin. But then I realized, this was the perfect place. The team was in good spirits. Mia had just finished a major project and Elise brought in a few folks from the Toronto office. Everyone was catching up, clinking glasses, talking about spring travel plans. Kaylin was sitting next to me, unusually quiet. I think he expected another round of forced charm. Midway through dinner, Elise brought up the retreat. She said it had sparked a lot of good conversations, especially around respect and leadership. Mia mentioned the salary moment, as she called it, and how much it stuck with her. I've never seen anyone handle something like that so calmly, she said. It really made me think about how often we're undermined, even subtly. I felt Kaylin stiffen beside me. And that's when I knew I had him. I didn't look at him. I just sipped my drink, nodded, and said, yeah, respect really is everything, isn't it? The table nodded. Someone said, exactly. He stayed quiet the rest of the night. Back in the car, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring out the window, his jaw clenched. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head, the quiet panic building behind his silence. He must have known that his time was running out. A few nights later, I caught him in the kitchen, talking to Brenna on the phone. Not even bothering to whisper. She's being weird lately, he was saying. I don't know, just distant. He laughed. Maybe she's finally realizing she's not all that. I walked in mid-laugh. He froze. The call ended quick. We didn't say anything to each other that night. Didn't need to. But something shifted in him after that. Maybe he knew I heard. Maybe he just felt it in the air, like an animal sensing the first crack of a coming storm. He started trying harder. Leaving notes on the fridge. texting me in the middle of the day, offering to walk the dog. He even cooked dinner one night. It was badly under-seasoned pasta, but the gesture was there. I didn't respond to any of it. Not in anger. Not in passive aggression. I just kept moving forward. I moved a few things into a storage unit. Just basics. A few boxes of clothes. Some of my work gear. He didn't notice. I started sleeping over at a friend's place here and there, under the guise of early meetings downtown. He didn't question it. I opened a new bank account. Transferred my direct deposit. Closed the joint credit card. He noticed that one. What happened to the card, he asked one morning, waving it in the air like it owed him an answer. I canceled it, I said, calmly. Didn't think we needed it anymore. He stared at me, confused, then laughed bitterly. You're really doing this, huh? I just looked at him. Doing what? He didn't answer. Just walked out the door. And still, I didn't cry. I waited until the papers were printed, signed, and served. I'd chosen not to surprise him in a dramatic moment, no confrontation in a restaurant, no screaming in front of neighbors. Just a courier at his office on a Wednesday afternoon. I heard from a mutual friend that he went pale when he opened the envelope. Sat down. Didn't move for 5 minutes. I wasn't trying to break him. I just wanted it to be real. The funny thing? He didn't come home that night. He didn't call. Didn't text. Just disappeared. And that was the most honest reaction he'd had in months. There's still more to tell. What happened after the papers were served? How Brenna responded when she realized she'd been part of something she didn't fully understand. And what happened the day Kaylin finally came back to talk. I didn't hear from Kaylin for 3 full days after the papers were served. No texts. No calls. Not even a snarky email, which, honestly, surprised me more than anything. I thought he'd show up pounding on the door, or blow up my phone with guilt trips. But nothing. Just silence. Then, on the 4th day, he showed up. I heard the jangle of his keys in the front door, and for a second, instinct kicked in. I tensed, heart racing like I was about to defend myself in court. He walked in slowly, wearing the same hoodie he'd had since college. The one with a bleach stain on the shoulder. His hair was messy. He looked tired, like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. I was sitting at the kitchen island, working on a deck for a client presentation. Didn't even close the laptop. He stood there for a moment, hand still on the doorframe. Then he said, "So this is it?" I didn't respond right away. I gave him the space to say more. "This is really happening?" he added, a little quieter. I closed my laptop gently and turned toward him. "It already happened, Kaylin. You just didn't notice." He let out a bitter laugh, but there was no bite in it. He looked around like the place suddenly felt foreign to him. "You really blindsided me," he said, sitting on the edge of the couch. "You embarrassed me in front of my team, mocked my work, disrespected me as a partner, and cheated," I said calmly. "You blindsided yourself." He rubbed his face. "It wasn't like that with Brenna. It just happened." "Of course it did," I said. "Because it's easier to be with someone who doesn't make you feel small. Who doesn't challenge you to be better." He didn't deny it. He just nodded. Quiet now. Reflective. Maybe for the first time. "I didn't expect you to leave," he admitted. That sentence hit different. Not in a sad way. In a freeing way. Because there it was, the root of it all. He never thought I could. Somewhere along the way, he convinced himself I needed him more than he needed me. That I'd put up with everything. That I'd stay. And now he was realizing, he bet wrong. "I loved you, Kaylin," I said, standing. "But I will never stay with someone who resents me for growing." There wasn't anything else to say. He left without taking much. A duffel bag. A few shirts. His old laptop. I let him keep the car, we'd already worked that out through the attorneys. I didn't need it, and honestly, I didn't want any more of our lives tangled than necessary. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Clean and clear. No drama. No court fights. Just signatures and silence. I kept the condo. It made sense financially, but also symbolically. This had been my home more than his. I was the one who decorated it. Picked the furniture. Paid most of the mortgage. Built memories here. He just passed through it. The day after everything was official, I booked myself a solo weekend trip to Seattle. Stayed in a boutique hotel, drank overpriced coffee, walked through the Pike Place market with no plans or schedule. Just me, breathing again. It was raining that Sunday when I sat in a cozy bookstore cafe. I opened my inbox and saw a message from Mia. Subject, still iconic. She'd attached a photo someone had taken at the retreat, me, standing in front of the conference table, manila folder in hand, mid-sentence. Your salary. His salary. Any other questions about how much of this is luck? It became kind of a legend at work. Not in a petty way. In an empowering way. Mia went on to say she'd applied for a senior role at another company. Said watching me handle that situation made her realize she was underpaid and undervalued. She asked me to be a reference. Of course I said yes. Meanwhile, Kaylin's life didn't spiral. No dramatic fall. But I did hear, through a mutual friend, that Brenna broke it off a few weeks after the papers came through. Apparently, she found out she wasn't the only other woman. Classic. He still works IT at a smaller firm now. Less money, more hours. He tried reaching out once, sent me an email with the subject line, "Hope you're doing okay." I never opened it. Not out of anger. But because I was doing more than okay. I was thriving. Since the divorce, I'd started mentoring junior designers through a local nonprofit, helping women break into tech. I found purpose again. Not just in work, but in ownership of my choices, my time, my energy. I hosted my first panel in San Francisco 3 months after the divorce. Got a standing ovation. One of the questions from the audience was, "What's the one thing that's kept you grounded through all your success?" I smiled. Knowing that I earned every bit of it, and not apologizing for it anymore.